Cherry Creek North, an upscale neighborhood in Denver, lay wrapped in morning mist. On a quiet street lined with luxurious mansions stood a house that showcased modern architectural beauty. Mary Brown stood by the large window of her home office, gazing at the distant Rocky Mountains. The soft pink morning sun gently colored the snow-capped peaks. She took a sip of her organic blend coffee and sat down at her latest iMac. 2 days until the deadline. She murmured to herself as she immersed herself in designing a new catalog for a high-end sportswear brand. At 36, Mary possessed an intellectual beauty that belied her age and was Denver's most sought-after freelance graphic designer. Her natural makeup and simple yet high-quality cashmere dress enhanced her sophisticated air. The office interior reflected her designer's eye, with Scandinavian furniture harmoniously blending with modern art. "Honey, I think I'll be home early today." A message arrived from her husband Richard around noon. He was a sharp professional, Denver's premier commercial real estate broker handling deals worth millions. Tall and handsome, always impeccably dressed in luxury suits, he was the epitome of success. Mary had met him 3 years ago while working on a condominium brochure design. After a whirlwind romance that seemed straight out of a movie, they held a lavish wedding with 500 guests that became the talk of Denver. "Mary, dear." At 3 p.m., she received a call from her mother-in-law, Elizabeth. A woman of refined beauty, Elizabeth had once owned a chain of luxury boutiques and still reigned as a social elite. Since losing her husband 5 years ago, she had been living an elegant retired life in her grand mansion in the Denver suburbs. "You're coming to the country club event this weekend, aren't you?" Her mother-in-law always exuded an intimidating presence with her perfect fashion sense and bearing. Though outwardly polite, Mary sometimes found it hard to read Elizabeth's true feelings beneath the surface. At dusk, Richard returned home early as planned. His luxury BMW X7 glided onto the white gravel driveway. "I'm home, Mary." Her husband strode through the door looking like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Mary felt renewed gratitude for the unexpectedly happy life she'd found in 3 years of marriage. This enviable lifestyle, ideal marriage, and secure position in high society. However, Mary had no way of knowing that this perfect daily life was about to crumble in a terrifying way. At 6 a.m., Mary woke up as usual. Richard was breathing quietly beside her in bed. She got up carefully to avoid making noise and changed into her latest Lululemon yoga wear. In the kitchen, she made a green smoothie using organic vegetables and fruits from Whole Foods. Using nutrient-rich ingredients was Mary's morning ritual. After 30 minutes of stretching in the glass-walled home gym, the rosy morning sun had begun to illuminate the Rocky Mountain ridgeline. "Good morning." Richard appeared in a perfectly pressed Armani suit after his shower. While brewing coffee for her husband, Mary confirmed today's schedule. "I have an online meeting with the LA client at 10. I have 3 property viewings. Should be back by evening." Their breakfast time together was brief, but it was their comfortable daily routine. After Richard left for work, Mary began her work in the home office. Bathed in natural light from the large windows, she immersed herself in advertising design work on her latest Mac. Her work was highly regarded, and she received constant requests from Denver's top companies. For lunch, she met her friend Jennifer at Cherry Creek Shopping Center. Jennifer worked in real estate and was a longtime friend introduced by Richard. "Mary, are the preparations for Elizabeth's birthday party going well?" "Yes, though I haven't heard many details yet." The two enjoyed a light lunch at a newly opened bistro while gossiping about the latest high society news. In the afternoon, she returned to work and handled video conferences with clients. In the evening, she received a call from Richard. "I'll be coming home with Mother today. We have something important to discuss." Mary was a bit surprised but quickly prepared for dinner. When Elizabeth visited, she had to prepare dishes to her taste. It was like an unwritten rule. At 7 p.m., Richard and Elizabeth arrived. Elizabeth was dressed, as always, in an elegant Chanel suit. "Mary, what a lovely fragrance." The dining room was filled with the fresh scent of lavender. Mary knew her mother-in-law's preferences. "Actually, I have a wonderful plan," Elizabeth began while sipping wine. "To celebrate my 70th birthday, let's go on a hiking trip, just the three of us." Richard has agreed. Hiking? Mary couldn't hide her surprise at the unexpected suggestion. Elizabeth wasn't known to be outdoorsy. "Yes. We'll go to Deer Creek Canyon Park. The scenery is perfect this time of year." Elizabeth's expression was unusually soft. "The mountains are beautiful in early summer, aren't they?" Richard was enthusiastic too. "It'll be good for you to take a break from work and refresh." Mary agreed, pressed by their enthusiasm. Indeed, a trip with the three of them might be a good opportunity to deepen their relationship. That night, before bed, Mary was checking online for new hiking gear. Richard was already breathing steadily in bed. Outside the window, Denver's night lights twinkled quietly. As Mary savored the happiness of this peaceful daily life, she felt a vague anticipation for the upcoming family trip. At that moment, she couldn't have imagined that this trip would change her life forever. At 4:30 a.m., Mary woke up before the alarm clock rang. The sky visible from the bedroom window was still dark, with stars shining crisp and clear. In bed, she thought about the strange dream she'd had last night. Standing on a cliff. But she couldn't remember what happened next. "Ready?" Richard appeared in his newly purchased North Face hiking wear after his shower. Mary nodded silently and changed into the same brand's outfit. In the kitchen, she packed the light meals and drinks she'd prepared the day before into a waterproof bag. Organic energy bars, trail mix, and hot tea in an insulated flask. Everything had been chosen with Elizabeth's preferences in mind. "The weather forecast looks fine." While checking the weather information displayed on the Apple TV in the living room, Mary also picked up her camera bag. The latest mirrorless camera was a Christmas present from Richard last year. At 5 o'clock sharp, Elizabeth arrived right on schedule. "Good morning, Mary." Elizabeth was surprisingly casual in her appearance. Instead of her usual elegant designer brands, she wore functional outdoor wear. However, her bearing remained as graceful as ever. "Everything's ready. It's going to be a wonderful day." There was something different in Elizabeth's voice. Mary felt a moment of unease but didn't dwell on it. The car left the quiet early morning streets of Denver and headed west on I-70. The street lights gradually became fewer, and they eventually entered a dark mountain road. The car was quiet, with Richard and Elizabeth occasionally speaking in low voices. "We're here." When they arrived at the Deer Creek Canyon Park parking lot, the sky had just begun to brighten. Only 3 cars were in the parking lot, and the surroundings were silent. In the distance, an American crow could be heard calling. "The temperature is lower than expected." As Elizabeth said, The air at around 2,000 meters elevation was cold, their breath visible in white puffs. Mary put on the fleece jacket she had prepared. "The route is this way." Richard led the way while checking his map app. The well-maintained mountain path climbed at a gentle gradient. Tall ponderosa pines lined both sides, filling the air with a fresh pine scent. Taking several breaks along the way, the three walked on quietly. Occasionally, Elizabeth would stop to take landscape photos. However, there was less of their usual social conversation, and a strange tension seemed to hang in the air. "This is the scenic point." After about 2 hours of walking, they reached their destination. Below stretched the Denver cityscape, wrapped in morning mist. The view from the steep cliff was truly breathtaking. "Let's take a break." At Elizabeth's suggestion, they sat down a little way from the cliff. Mary poured tea from the flask and offered it to Elizabeth. At that moment, Richard moved several meters away to check his mobile phone. The wind grew stronger. Mary's long hair covered her face as she unconsciously moved closer to the cliff edge to look at the view. That's when she faintly heard a conversation behind her. "The insurance procedures are all taken care of, right?" Elizabeth's voice. Gone was its usual elegance, replaced by a cold tone. "Yes, I increased it 3 months ago. If we make it look like an accident, it'll be perfect." Richard's response sent a chill down Mary's spine. She seems to have noticed something recently. "It has to be today." In that instant, Mary understood everything. Her husband's unnaturally kind behavior lately, her mother-in-law's sudden trip suggestion, and the meaning of last night's dream. By the time she tried to turn around, it was already too late. A strong force pushed her from behind, and Mary's body went over the cliff edge. In her final moment before falling, she saw their cold expressions. Richard's emotionless gaze. Elizabeth's satisfied smile. Time seemed to stop. The sound of cutting through the wind. The rustling of trees. Her own scream. Then, a violent impact. Though the trees somewhat cushioned her fall, Mary's consciousness gradually faded. As sirens began to sound in the distance, only one thought swirled in her mind. "I will survive, no matter what." When consciousness returned, the first thing she noticed was the smell of disinfectant. A private room at UC Health University of Colorado Hospital. Soft sunlight streamed through the large windows, gently illuminating the predominantly white interior. Abstract paintings hung on the walls, giving the room an almost luxury hotel-like atmosphere. Mary gritted her teeth against the pain that enveloped her entire body. The memory of what happened before she lost consciousness stabbed at her mind like a sharp blade. Her husband and mother-in-law's conspiracy. The fall from the cliff. And those cold expressions. As the door to the hospital room slowly opened, Mary immediately closed her eyes. "Still not awake." Elizabeth's voice. Her usual dignified tone had returned. "The doctor said she should regain consciousness soon." Next, Richard's footsteps approached. His leather shoes made faint sounds on the expensive flooring. "Are you sure this is okay?" Richard's voice carried feigned concern. Mary continued to breathe regularly, as if in deep sleep. The breathing technique she had learned from her mother, who had worked as a nurse, was now proving useful in an unexpected situation. "Oh," she moved. Elizabeth raised her voice as if noticing something. Mary decided to slowly open her eyes. The first thing she saw was the two of them standing by her bedside. Elizabeth was dressed in a top-tier designer suit, and Richard was immaculate in a navy Armani suit. Like stage actors playing the roles of family members distraught over an accident. "Mary! Thank goodness!" Richard showed an expression of relief as he tried to take Mary's hand. Though she felt an instinctive urge to avoid it, she remained passive with a vacant expression. "Do you remember anything before the accident?" In response to Elizabeth's question, Mary shook her head. The gesture was calculated to convey confusion and anxiety. "Why am I here?" She made her voice tremble as she pretended to have lost her memory. "You slipped while hiking," Richard began to explain. "You fell from the cliff. We were so worried." Mary felt nauseous at the false kindness in his words. But she didn't let it show on her face. "Miraculously, there don't seem to be any serious injuries," Elizabeth explained as if playing the role of a doctor. "But you'll need to rest for a while." At that moment, the real doctor entered the room. The middle-aged doctor with graying hair approached Mary with a gentle expression. "Mrs. Brown, how are you feeling?" My head is. It's normal for memories to be unclear. Temporary memory confusion often occurs due to the impact of bruising." The doctor continued explaining Mary's condition, mixing in medical terminology. Full body bruising, mild concussion, and the need for a week of observation. "Thanks to your family's dedicated care, we can expect a smooth recovery." At those words, Mary inwardly smiled bitterly. The very people who had injured her were now playing the role of caregivers. She felt a quiet anger at this ironic situation. Rehabilitation can be done at home. However, someone needs to be with you at all times. Elizabeth immediately responded to the doctor's words. "Of course, we'll take turns staying with her." Mary felt a new fear at the sight of Elizabeth playing the perfect mother-in-law. Home recovery might give them another opportunity. But Mary's face showed nothing. She just stared blankly at the ceiling. At that moment, one decision had solidified within her. To perfect this act and continue playing the role of memory loss until she could gather definitive evidence. That was her only path to survival. Outside the window, Colorado's blue sky stretched out. That blue reminded her of happier days past. But now, Mary's heart was filled with a cold flame of revenge. 1 week after discharge, Mary sat on her living room sofa with her MacBook open. On the surface, she was playing the role of a patient slowly recovering from memory loss. However, the screen displayed records of real estate transactions and bank transfer histories. Richard was at work, and Elizabeth was out for social engagements. The two had been taking turns checking on her, but today was unusually quiet with no one around. "So this is it." Mary furrowed her brow at the transaction records displayed on the screen. A large-scale real estate development project that Richard had handled 3 years ago. Behind this seemingly successful project, massive debt had been hidden. In the silence broken only by the sound of typing, she gathered evidence one piece at a time. The life insurance policy that had been substantially increased 3 months before the accident. Traces of loan shark collections. And suspicious transfer records to Elizabeth's bank account. $3 million. When the total amount of Richard's debt became clear, Mary maintained an icy calm. An amount far exceeding her annual income as a designer. It explained why he had thought to kill her. She had already obtained security camera footage. Images of the two having a long discussion at Elizabeth's home early on the morning of the accident. And social media posts from hikers who had captured the incident on the mountain. The unnatural positioning of the three people visible in the distance completely contradicted the explanation of an accidental fall. "Ma'am, it's time for your medicine." Maria, the housekeeper, entered the living room at the scheduled time. Mary quickly closed her laptop and returned to playing the role of the obedient patient. "Thank you, Maria." The trembling of her hand as she accepted the medicine was also part of the act. After Maria left, Mary discreetly disposed of the pills in the glass. Her investigation of the medicine had revealed that it contained drugs that affected memory. In the evening, Richard returned home. "How are you feeling?" "Getting better, little by little." While smiling at her husband, Mary was thinking. Tomorrow, everything would be ready to submit all the evidence to the police. An anonymous tip had also been arranged. That night, after Richard had fallen asleep in the bedroom, Mary quietly made her way to the study. She had already confirmed the safe's combination while pretending to be unconscious in the hospital, catching it from Richard's phone screen. The stack of documents that came out contained decisive evidence of Elizabeth and Richard's conspiracy. Insurance fraud plans, fabricated accident explanations, and numerous documents with her forged signature. The next morning, when Elizabeth came to check on her as scheduled, everything came to an end. The doorbell rang, and the police arrived. Elizabeth was shocked, and Richard rushed home from work. The elegant masks fell from both their faces. "I never lost my memory for a moment." Mary's cold voice echoed through the silent living room. "I clearly remember your conversation just before you pushed me off the cliff." "This is ridiculous," Richard shouted. "There can't be any evidence. Everything was recorded." Mary produced the small recorder she had hidden in her clothes on the day of the hike. "No way." The color drained from Elizabeth's face. "This recorder is waterproof. It recorded your conversation along with my fall." The police calmly began reading them their rights. Police sirens broke the morning quiet of the upscale neighborhood. Outside the window, the beautiful Rocky Mountains gleamed as always. Mary felt a deep sigh escape as she sensed the beginning of a new life. It was over. All the false masks had fallen away on this morning. Denver was about to greet a new day. 1 year later in Denver. In her new design studio in Cherry Creek, Mary opened the newspaper while basking in the morning sun streaming through the large windows. Real estate tycoon Richard Brown sentenced to 25 years for attempted murder. Accomplice Elizabeth's 20-year sentence confirmed. She quietly closed the newspaper. The trial had dragged on longer than expected, but all the evidence had been accepted, and the two had received appropriate sentences. Stacks of new project proposals covered her desk. After the incident, Mary's reputation had grown even stronger. Her strength as a survivor had become its own brand in the creative world. "Your client has arrived," came the message from reception. Today she had a meeting with a new client. Outside the window, the Rocky Mountains stood unchanged. The place that had once brought her to the brink of death, Mary now saw with different eyes. That cliff had become the place that heralded the beginning of her new life. On her desk sat a photo of Mary smiling with her parents from her hometown. After the incident, she had started spending weekends at her family home in Minnesota. She was rediscovering the warmth of her true family. "Well, shall we begin?" Mary straightened her back and prepared to welcome her new client. There was no more hesitation in her eyes. She was certain that her life ahead was full of new possibilities. The city of Denver continued moving forward. And she too was taking a new step. In the bright sunshine, Mary's new story was quietly beginning.